Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Nightlight. We want to thank Ken Quiethawk for that amazing intro and ask you to check him out on the internet. He's a native storyteller, and he and his wife, Deb, have done an amazing job of preserving history and tradition through their storytelling. It's a fascinating history. Mark has a great couple of guests on tonight, so sit back and get ready to be totally, absolutely entertained. Mark, show's all yours.
Great. Thank you. Barbara, how are you doing this week?
Doing very, very well, thank you.
Okay, good. I met our guests over the last couple of years at the Rod Serling Twilight Zone conferences. This past year we spent a lot of time together, and they took great care of me being so far from home and by myself. The group of international friends that formed during those conferences have an amazing array of talents, like Shelley Young, Tom Elliott, and a couple guys from Ireland. We may recognize names of radio shows like Amos and Andy, Fibber McGee and Molly, but what was it about the shows that made their names recognizable 60, 70 years later? Why is the Twilight Zone series being remade again? Many people prefer vinyl records over CDs. Since we're in the information age and surrounded by technology, what is the popularity of looking to art from our grandparents' generation? So for tonight's Look at History, we have hosts from Radio Once More, Helen and Johnny Holmes. Hi, Helen and Johnny. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing? We're doing good.
Hello, Mark. Great to be here.
Woohoo!
We are glad you're here. And Johnny, clarifying for the listeners, you're not the porn star, are you?
No, but Helen is married to him.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
You'd be surprised how many times that comes up in conversation.
Okay, well, it's just happen to have the same name. Okay, so we'll call. Let's see. Maybe we should start with one of the commercials you played a couple weeks ago on your show, RadioOnceMore.com. There's a gratuitous plug. Neil, the big boss, said he'd pay me for each plug out of his hefty
out of Johnny's
stimulus
pay?
check. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, you work at the New Jersey uncollected tax department, and
That's me.
yeah, and I happened to, when I was there in New Jersey, I happened to leave $20 million laying around. Could you send that to me?
Only if it has your social birth date and you send an ID and prove it's yours.
Oh, okay.
Nothing's free.
And it's not necessarily unclaimed tax. It's unclaimed property, which is any type of monetary item you may have misplaced.
Okay. Well, okay. So
and once you collect it, you can stop by with my buddies because then you can pay the taxes on it.
There you go.
That's how it works. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay taxes on it, but we do give you interest.
Well, if the interest is taxable.
It is.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
on $20 million, you're going to say hefty amount of interest. So.
Okay. Well,
depending on when you left it.
I think you'll walk away clearing $1.98.
Okay.
And with that, you can enter the beauty shop, the beauty thing for the $1.98 beauty contest.
Okay. We could
Remember that?
get into the Gong Show as well. I think they were on about the same same time after school. Okay. So, but one of the commercials you played gave me the idea to illustrate some points we'll develop over the evening. You played the Armour Hot Dogs theme song. The hot dogs, Armour hot dogs. What kinds of kids eat Armour hot dogs? Fat kids, skinny kids, kids who climb on rocks. Yeah, even kids with chicken pox. Yeah. Now we got all these listeners saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't get that song out of my head." But
that was the idea, Mark. Good.
Yeah. But there's those jingles and commercials from like 50 years ago. We could still sing along with them, except for Carlisle Rachel, who's only 29. But there's something that just stuck in our minds with those songs when we're little, just coming home from school, when you get these kind of commercials on. That's some of the old time radio stuff you play on your show. What are those commercials doing 40, 50 years later when we hear them? How does that nostalgia impact us? What does it mean to humans to have that memory from so long ago?
Well, when you talk about these classic commercial jingles and ads, and right along with the radio shows, and you mentioned television, classic TV shows, all this that we categorize in the world of nostalgia, I like to say this is actually it works in a similar manner like a time machine. When we hear these jingles, we hear these old radio shows or songs, or watch these old TV shows or cartoons. There's just all this is filed away in our mind. And when we hear you mentioned the Armour hot dog jingle, it'll take you back, when you were a kid. You remember maybe listening to that jingle on the radio or seeing the television spot, maybe on a Saturday afternoon, and you go back to go, oh yeah, and Dad would fire up the grill, and you think about how basic the grills were back in the 60s and 70s, not the real big fancy ones they have now with side burners and all that. And but you look back with fondness, your parents are still alive in your mind, and you're thinking about how good the burgers tasted and how much fun. And it's just a very nice nostalgic moment. And that's the beauty of these programs. It instantly puts you back then. And I guess that's why I've immersed myself in nostalgia. I just love tapping into those memories, into that good feeling. I've told you in the past, I really don't watch any current television at all. I'm strictly a nostalgia person. I watch old TV shows. I listen to old-time radio shows. I watch cartoons and old movies, and I really don't watch anything new. And I even watch very little news, although lately maybe a little more with the current situation, just to know whether I can step outside or not, basically. But and I'm a much happier person in doing that. I know some people have said, you don't watch any news. How do you know what's going on? And I freely admit, I say, okay, I understand. I'm an ostrich. I live the ostrich life. I stick my head in the sand and all that, and I listen to the Armour hot dog jingle. But I'm a happy ostrich. So that's kind of my answer to that. But yeah, all these bring back wonderful memories. Back when your parents or grandparents were still alive, and it's nice to kind of remember that again, and it brings a little smile to your face, and that's why I love it so much. I have a steady diet of nostalgia every day, probably close to 24/7, actually.
That's right.
Okay, and there's out of all the commercials that have been made that have aired on TV for the last 70 some years, whenever TV was invented, you get a few that are the most memorable, like that. What was it, like the presidential campaign with the nuclear bomb going on? Is that for the 1968?
Yeah, I think that was Goldwater.
Yeah. Okay, that one. You get the dancing cigarette packs, but probably the one that maybe most of tonight's listeners would remember is the car driving by and they throw the garbage out of the window, and you have the Native American just look at kind of like a disgust with those driving past him, and he has the tear running down his cheek. That has to be one of the most memorable commercials ever made.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's probably one of the most famous public service spots ever. They ran a whole series of those about pollution, and they had a top-notch announcer, William Conrad. And you talk about old-time radio. William Conrad played Matt Dillon on the radio version of Gunsmoke, and did lots of other radio. He was very prolific in radio. He can be heard in many shows, and then he did move on to TV, and most of us probably remember him playing Frank Cannon on television. But they used his powerful voice to really add that extra punch to the visuals with the, as you said, the Native American Indian and the people throwing the trash out, and that wonderful tear streaming down. Wonder how many takes that took just to get it right.
Right. And that's like you just mentioned, William Conrad's voice was used in that commercial, and that's one of the nice things about your show on radio. Once more, is you get some of these behind the scenes type information where you may kind of forget the image remains with us. You may kind of forget the voice, but in many occasions, when you and Helen are on there, Neil, you're able to develop that commercial or explain more about the shows that we may forget, make other connections with, this guy was in this episode, or on the commercial, but he was also on this episode of just say the Twilight Zone, and would go on the Brady Bunch, something like that, and that's one of the interesting aspects of what you two do.
Well, thank you. And yes, in fact, when we do our, in addition to our show at Radio Once More, it actually started from, we do a series of coffee shop presentations at a coffee shop in beautiful downtown Mount Holly, New Jersey, as we put it. And every other month we put together a theme, and it's an old-time radio presentation. We'll play 3 episodes from the golden age of radio, and we'll give just a little brief introduction. I don't pass myself off as a historian or an expert. I'm just a fan. So I just do a very basic thumbnail sketch of the series, and then we'll play it. And then what I try to do, kind of like what you were leading up to, Mark, is when the show's over, to tie, maybe some of the actors, actresses in the episode that we just played, I try to find a connection to something that the people at the coffee shop know. And many times it's, maybe cartoon voices or maybe a part in a movie or something to that effect. And I'll say, you heard in this episode Mel Blanc. Of course, Mel Blanc later on, did the voice of Bugs Bunny and Barney Rubble and so forth. And I try to make that bridge so that people go, oh, okay, that's where, it sounded familiar. Or another great example is the actor Joseph Kearns, very big in radio. He was the announcer on Suspense for a while, and he was on the Jack Benny show a lot. He was very, very busy during the days of radio. But most of us know Joseph Kearns as playing Mr. Wilson on the TV series Dennis the Menace. So I have a little clip where I play Joseph Kearns and Dennis the Menace, and he's usually frustrated and goes, oh, great Scott. But that's Joseph Kearns.
Okay, and when Helen, Johnny said he's not watching a lot of news. Do you see the just say watching the Three Stooges, not really watching a lot of the most current TV shows is
certainly.
It's not really anti-future. There is a security of watching these older shows, but they did create some templates for what we do on our shows. But how do you view all this nostalgia and kind of looking more backwards towards these older shows? Does it help you move forward with fresh ideas?
I think it does. I myself also like to watch the older shows, like on MeTV and Decades and things like that. I love the Stooges. So Johnny was very
good choice.
Johnny was very happy with that when we met.
Quiet, numbskulls! I'm broadcasting.
But I think too, when you're watching nostalgia shows, it just takes your mind off what's going on currently. Right now the news is they're all saying the same thing all the time, every time you watch it. So sometimes you just need a break from hearing all that. I'm working from home now, so I don't really get to watch the news because I'm working from 8 to 4. So
you listen to old-time radio.
Yes, I do.
Good choice.
I have we have an internet radio in the kitchen. I listen to that.
You get lucky, you hear me sometimes.
Sometimes.
By the way, Mark, I'm on right now as we speak. I just was downstairs, and Radio Once More is playing a series that I host called The Investigator. So isn't that neat? I'm on 2 internet radio stations simultaneously.
There you go.
Are you live on the other one too?
No.
That would be something really that's going back to.
I'm not that good. No, that's pre-recorded.
Oh, okay.
So that's in the can, so to speak. But it's a series called The Investigators, and I was funny. I said, "Oh, neat," because before I came up here and connected with you, I got a cup of coffee, and I said, "Oh, The Investigators is on. How convenient."
Then, of course, we are on every Wednesday from 9 to midnight, and every other week of those Wednesdays we are live. So the other week we have a variety pack of pre-recorded old-time radio.
Right. We put together what we call the Holmesy Hall of Fame, and I really enjoyed putting those together. That's the non-live week, but it's like Helen says, we kind of package it as a variety pack of old-time radio, because old-time radio fans have different likes and dislikes. Like the big boss, Neil Ellis, for example, he's just not a big fan of the scary stuff, I mean, I love the scary shows, Lights Out, one of my favorites, Hall of Fantasy, Suspense, and we always try to play one of those on every one of our shows, and it's just not Neil's thing, whenever I play one, and he gets a little...
Holmesy?
Yeah, he gets a little upset, so... But the Holmesy Hall of Fame, it's 6 shows. We usually have about 2 comedies. We throw a drama in there. We throw either a sci-fi / adventure. We also have a Western. And as I said, I end it with a Holmesy haunt.
And okay, speaking of the Holmesy haunt, you got me, listen to the Lighthouse one with that got
Three Skeleton Key.
Yeah. That one with the rats at the inundate the lighthouse at the end. Okay, that one could be found on YouTube, right?
Oh yeah, you can find that quite easily, and that's a classic one, starring Vincent Price. Everyone loves him. We've played that many times. We played it at our very first coffee shop presentation, and that's going back close to 7 years. October of 2012 was when we did our very first. When we do these coffee shop presentations, we call it an evening of old time radio, and we have different themes. And we did it in October of 2012, so we called it Fright Night. And we played 3 scary shows, and we ended it with the classic Three Skeleton Key. It's from the series Escape. Which, by the way, if anyone's interested in Escape, next Wednesday, for our Woohoo Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, we're planning what we call a triple-decker helping we do that every now and then of a certain series, and we're going to feature a triple-decker helping of Escape. We're not going to play Three Skeleton Key this time, though, because in May, we're going to celebrate Vincent Price's birthday, and we'll probably save the rats for when we have Vincent Price on, our good buddy Vincent Price.
Johnny, this is Vincent Price.
Yes.
Okay, so since you're bringing up Vincent Price now, and
I just keep throwing you off topic. I'm sorry, Mark. We'll just go where the wind blows us.
That's fine. That's one of the interesting things about what you and Helen do is
we're good at derailing. Yes.
With these shows that aired maybe in the mid to late 40s, actors like Vincent Price are just getting their foot in the door in the acting world. About 10 years later, he's going to be starring in those William Castle movies like The House on Haunted Hill. I love that one, being like 7 or 8 years old, watching that at my grandparents' house. And
I liked him when he did all the Edgar Allan Poe scary ones.
Those were good ones too.
My favorite one's The Tingler.
Ooh.
That was arguably the first LSD trip on film.
Vincent would be in. Do you remember that, like, maybe late 70s TV show he was in? It was kind of like a horror-themed one. It was in color. I think it aired after school. But then in the mid 80s, he's has a role with biggest selling albums of all time, Thriller. So what you're doing on radio once more is you are weaving all these different appearances and the trivia of just say Vincent Price, and just giving your listeners a career retrospective of what he really did contribute to the horror genre, by starting off with in radio.
Yeah, he did lots of roles in radio. He played the Saint on radio, and he just did a lot of regular dramatic appearances. When he first came to Hollywood, he wasn't automatically the horror king that he became known. He would just be in regular dramatic films, and as time went on, he kind of became the ghoul king that he became. But he's good. And so you mentioned about weaving all this stuff together. And when I first got started on Radio Once More, Neil would chat with us, and he would say, listen, this is all old-time radio. It's all been played before. It's the same stuff. So what you just need to do is just kind of reshuffle things and try to, give it a different packaging. And so that's kind of what we do. We keep it fun. We work some trivia in there. As I said, I'm no expert, but we just have a lot of fun with it. And, when we started, and I would say, Neil, can I do this? Or can I do that in connection with the shows? And, he was very easy to talk with. Whenever I had a question for him, he was always easy to, come back and...
I don't care, Holmes. Do what you want.
Yeah, he pretty much let me do what I want. So, very easy boss to work for. So, thanks, Neil.
With our attendance at the Twilight Zone conferences, there have been actors there who did put on some of the never performed, because they're recently discovered radio manuscripts, and there have been the troops there reenacting these recently discovered stories written by Rod Serling. And there's actually an art form to what doing. They had some of the sound effects. There's really, it really is an art form. There's a lot more to it than just reading scripts.
Absolutely. It's acting, and you're only using audio. Whether it be the dialogue, music, sound effects, as you said. It's an amazing art form, and it's what's interesting that I love about radio. It's how we all veg out, sit back, and one of the things we called the TV growing up, the boob tube and this and that, the idiot box, whatever you want to call it, and you just kind of sit there and veg out and let it feed you, whatever. With radio, you are an important part of the process. They provide you with the dialogue, the descriptions, and the sound effects, but your mind is active. And what you're doing, you are, you're in your mind, you're coming up what the characters look like, what type of costumes they're wearing, what type of setting is set. And you're putting all these visual images in your mind. And granted, it's more work per se than just watching TV where it's all spoon-fed to you. But I think when the production is over after a half-hour episode that you've really gotten into and enjoyed, it's in some instances a much more gratifying and enjoyable time when you're listening to some of these great radio productions. And what's really interesting is that one person's, because the more you listen to, the more your mind becomes accustomed to do it, and what your mind puts together would be totally different than someone else. But that's okay, because it's your own little stage in your mind, and that's how you're picturing things. And it's a lot of fun. And one of my favorite, I have an example I can show you, and it's one of my very, very favorite shows, because I first got into old-time radio back in the early 1980s, and it came from my love of old-time radio came from two other loves, and the love of Major League Baseball. I was a big Philadelphia Phillies fan, and my love of animated cartoons, which I still love cartoons. I call myself a big kid. I'm a big kid, right?
Yeah.
And when the Phillies, and back then, when I would listen to the Phillies in the 70s and the early 80s, that's back in the day when not every game was broadcasted on television. Maybe an occasional away game during the week, or a Sunday afternoon game was on the television. But during the week, if you really wanted to follow the Phillies, a lot of us kids would have these little transistor radios and listening to them and listening to our broadcasters and following the Phillies. So I was really into it. Around about 10 years old is when I really got into it. And I would listen to the pregame show, then I would listen to the actual entire broadcast, and then you had a postgame show. And they even had a segment, because there was a local eatery around here called Gino's, which is now gone. And they had Gino's Star of the Game, and they would interview him. And then after that, they would have like one of those phone-in sports phone type shows, and people would call in and talk about the Phillies. And so it was like an all-day evening experience for Phillies fans. Well, I remember during one of those, a spot during that time where this is WCAU out of Philadelphia. It was one of the big super mega stations, 50,000-watt stations, which unfortunately it's now defunct, no longer there. But WCAU was trying something new called Radio Family Classics. And they played a couple clips of different shows, and I just only heard a little bit about it. I didn't know much about it. I remember my dad talking about things, Fibber McGee and Molly, Amos and Andy, you mentioned earlier, and so forth. But they played a couple quick clips. I got a couple quick clips I could play. Here's one that I remember them playing.
The Johnson Wax Program with Fibber McGee and Molly.
And that was from Fibber McGee and Molly, and I didn't really know anything about that. And then they also played one from The Great Gildersleeve, and I heard something like this.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Now, what's interesting about that, because I heard this Great Gildersleeve introduction, and my mind went back to a Bugs Bunny cartoon when he's running around a department store, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that was basically a Great Gildersleeve caricature. And, he even had the voice and so forth. And I remember Bugs saying, "Hey, you sound like the guy on the radio." And he called him the Great Gildersleeve, kind of like a play off of the Great Gildersleeve. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize it, but that really intrigued me. And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." I didn't put two and two together until later on. In fact, I have a quick clip from that, just the audio from that Bugs Bunny, and you can hear exactly what I recall. So this is from the Bugs Bunny with that Great Gildersleeve caricature.
Kind of outsmarted you, little chum?
Hey, wait a minute. Say that again.
Kind of outsmarted you, little chum?
Yeah, that's it. You sound just like that guy on the radio, the Great Gildersleeve.
I do? Kind of outsmarted you, little chum? Hey, are you trying to pull a fast one?
Well, confidentially, Chubby, I just did.
So that's the clip from the Bugs Bunny cartoon, and they tied in with the Great Gildersleeve. And then finally, the third clip that they played, and this has turned out to be one of my very, very favorite series, because at this time, again, it was probably around 81, maybe 80, 81, maybe 82. So I was early in my high school life. Mm-hmm. I was already a fan of like Twilight Zone that you and I love, and The Outer Limits, and some of those other type series.
Right.
But this is a short clip from another great series called The Hall of Fantasy, and WCAU in this quick promo clip, they played a clip something like this.
The Hall of Fantasy.
And that's just the beginning. It's, to me, one of the best openings of any radio series. That drum, boom, boom, and we were talking about how the radio you create images, and I have a wonderful story with that specific clip. When I first heard that years ago, I was a Cub Scout, and I remember going to Washington D.C. and we toured the Pentagon. And one memory I have as a youngster is that the tour guide of the Pentagon, he showed us all around the Pentagon. But he did the entire tour, he walked backwards. He obviously knew the Pentagon like the back of his hand, so he was leading us all around, walking backwards, all around the entire facility. And he was saying that this building is designed in such a way you can get to any 2 points within, X amount of time. And so in listening to that clip, when I first heard that whole intro, and you hear the announcer's deep booming voice, who, by the way, is the creator of the Hall of Fantasy, a gentleman by the name of Richard Thorne, and you hear that drum pounding, in my mind, I conjured him as like taking us down the corridor of the Hall of Fantasy, and he's, in my mind again, he's walking backwards, and all of us as the listeners that we're about to enter this experience, we're walking down this corridor, and he's leading us the way. Again, that's just how my mind did it, but that goes back to the experience from when I was a Cub Scout getting toured around the Pentagon. But those three clips is kind of what intrigued me and got me first into old-time radio, and then I started listening to WCAU on a regular basis. I started actually recording them on tapes and collecting them, and that's a big part of nostalgia, collecting things. I collect radio shows, I collect TV shows. Well, that was the very beginning of collecting radio shows, and I still have all those tapes sitting in a bag in a closet up here, but I've since digitized from CDs and from other collectors and so forth, and so now everything I play at the coffee shop or on radio once more, it's a digital file, MP3, WAV files, that sort of thing. Again, I'm sure I threw you way off course there, Mark. Sorry about that. So just rein me in as needed, all right?
this is perfect, and I've already had one comment from Mermaid Lisa that she liked me singing the hot dog song. But
hello, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
By the way, every year when it's summertime, and the big boss usually has a show about summer and barbecues and things you do, along the lines of nostalgia. And every year we get into it's a friendly argument. But Neil, for some reason, he breaks, I think it's the 11th or 12th commandment. He puts ketchup on a hot dog. To me, that's not the way it's supposed to be done. A hot dog is meant to have mustard on it. So as proof for my argument, I play that clip that you're referring to, that you heard when I played it during that Woohoo Extra. And part of the words, it goes, slap on the mustard, and away we go. So I say, there it is. There's my proof. I rest my case.
Helen, do you have a similar or completely different story about how classic you got interested in classic radio and TV?
Well, I think if I remember well, my father had many of the radio shows on albums. So, on a Saturday or a Friday, he would play, the records, and I wouldn't be sitting there listening to it, but I would, walking back and forth from the living room to wherever, and I would hear these shows. But I've always been interested in that type of storytelling. I like the verbal, where you have to listen to something with your headphones.
Mm-hmm.
When I used to work my late night jobs, on the way home, I would try to find some type of old-time radio or old-time story on the radio as I'm driving home. But I myself, I enjoy the creepy ones.
Holmesy haunt.
Okay, and just to go back to important point that Johnny made earlier about the TV is good, but a radio stimulates your brain more by making you imagine the visuals that like the TV provides. One of the skits that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about is the 8-minute long Who's on First. It does work on radio and on you can find it on YouTube. It's a skit that translates very well to actually both mediums. I find it to be one of the world's all-time greatest comedy bits. It's intricate. The timing is perfect. Abbott and Costello, it just really perfected the Who's on First skit, and for what, approaching 70 years, it's still hilarious today. What do you see as the legacy of Who's on First?
Well, I agree with you. It is arguably one of the greatest comedy sketches, bits of all time. And you bring up an excellent point when it comes to humor, comedy, humor. There's different approaches that have been made back in radio, and I guess even up to current time. Well, as I told you, I don't watch too much current television, when the producers and writers of the show, whether they decide to have humor that's more topical of the time, or to have humor that's more universal and timeless. And, topical, where they talk about current events, politics is a popular one. It's very popular. Things that are going on from day to day in that time frame. But unfortunately, they don't transfer very well. You mentioned 60, 70 years down the line, when you listen to some of these type of shows with topical humor, you need to be listening and have your encyclopedia in the other hand and look up many of these references to understand what they're talking about to get the humor. So that doesn't translate as well. But the shows and the comedy bits where they kept it as timeless, universal, like the Abbott and Costello Who's on First sketch, which is perfect because baseball is baseball. Baseball has changed very little in all these years. We all know about it. They were one of the masters at wordplay, and it's just so well done. And they had did it so many times. They had a formula, and they could read off of each other, and it was never the same way. There was always a little deviation. It's not like they had a script of it and they exactly read it the same way each time. They knew the formula of it in their mind, and they knew where they had to get to. But sometimes it would take little different detours, but they would eventually get to the end of it, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And you mentioned how many different mediums that they did this on. They began on stage and radio and films. They were like the biggest box office draw in the 1940s. And they even had a television series as well, and they did the Who's on First bit on every one of them, and it's hysterical no matter where you see it or hear it. Even in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, they have a little island, I guess you'd say, set up where they have this routine on videotape, right, sweetie?
Yep.
Videotape, and it's looping.
It's on a loop.
And it's just playing continuously. So from when they open the museum to when they close it, you can stop there and just, take in the Abbott and Costello Who's on First. And it's timeless humor that we just love.
Yeah, you can just put on the YouTube video of it and walk out of the room, like you're imitating, just listening to it on the radio. It is funny, when you see the Lou in his facial expressions. The whole experience is just hilarious in whichever way you experience it. I just think I've always just been fascinated by it. It's really it's not about it's confusing questions with a statement, like who is the person's name on first base. It's not a question. It's that's the guy's name, and that's the confusion that makes it so funny. But do you know anything about how they wrote it, where the idea came from, where they first performed it?
I don't know the origin of it when they came up with it, but I think they first performed it. Well, at least as a lot of us were told, it was on the Kate Smith radio show, and
that was about. I'm looking here on Wikipedia, 1938.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, it goes back that far. I did not know that.
Yeah,
it actually goes back to the early 30s, where people did something similar, but just used different examples, like who died, or what's the name of that town next to which. I'm just reading this off of Wikipedia. So they just they're the ones who they actually copyrighted it in 1944.
Ah.
Okay.
So, and now you know the rest of the story. But that was their strong point was this wordplay inter-exchange.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get it. And they worked in words that had multiple meanings and usages, and they did that time after time. That Who's on First is, of course, their best known one, but they also had the famous Hertz You Drive, the Hertz rental car. If it hurts, you drive. Well, if it hurts, why do I want to drive? And a similar type of sketch.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're talking about one that I've always loved when they talk about fill it up with down. You're talking about like a pillow or a blanket. Fill it up with down. Well, what is it, up or down? No, I'm not talking about down in the direction down. I'm talking about when you get down from a duck's back. And he goes, I never even got on a duck's back. So it's the same type of humor. It's hysterical, and they're really good at that.
How long were they together? Helen just said copyrighted it in 1945, but they first started performing in 38, and Lou actually died pretty young.
He did. Was he in his 50s?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the early 50s. So, but we're talking maybe 15 years, but they really left a big impression.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think they did have some dissension, and they did break up. Although I think Lou didn't live too long after their breakup. I don't know the exact time frame. I think he even did a solo movie or two. And there's an appearance of Lou Costello on the game show, because I've been getting into game shows a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to YouTube. He's in an episode as a guest on I've Got a Secret with Gary Moore. So you can go home. After you listen to Mark's show, of course, you can go turn to YouTube and listen to it or watch it.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, speaking of game shows, it did a pretty lengthy segment on Groucho Marx, and you got the Hello, Must Be Going song. And
Hello, I must be going. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it's I really like that contradictory statement within one sentence. And it's a little. Maybe you could see where, say someone like John Lennon would have been inspired by that. With you say goodbye and I say hello. And it's really interesting, like you said, word play. But you get these movies that the Marx Brothers did. But you also draw our attention to that he had a very popular game show.
Tremendous game show. I love it. You're talking about You Bet Your Life, and
yes.
In fact, that's the presentation. That's the last presentation we did at the coffee shop. How nice of you to work that in, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank Yeah, we did that in
February.
That was our last presentation. Unfortunately, our February one, because of the the health situation crisis, we postponed it. So our
April.
Did I say April?
No, you said February.
Oh, April. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did it in February, and our April presentation we had to cancel or postpone. We're shooting for June, but that's still up in the air. We'll get back when everything's safe. But when we did the Groucho Marx presentation at the coffee shop, we called it
the one, the only Groucho.
But what was amazing about Groucho Marx, because he is arguably, and people have different opinions, and that's fine, but he was arguably the quickest wit of all time. I mean, he just would trigger a response, a funny response to almost anything you said.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for him, it didn't work very well in a scripted format. If you threw a script at Groucho Marx, he deviated from it quite a bit.
Kind of like what you do.
Yeah, exactly. We throw a monkey wrench into the operation.
Exactly. Oh, wise guy.
And so he didn't really have a great. I mean, he was very good in movies with his brothers, the Marx Brothers movies. They did ad lib and deviate from the script, but the producers allowed that and went with it, and it has tremendous results. I mean, their movies are golden. Now he's tried some different avenues on radio, and nothing quite fit. What would be good use of his skill set, of his ad libbing, of his quick wit. Until this producer, and I can't remember his name, John Goodell, I believe his name was. He spoke with him and came up with the whole idea of perfect radio venue for you would be sort of like as a host, like a quiz show. And the whole thing with You Bet Your Life, it is a quiz show, but it's just a clever way to exploit Groucho's talents, so that it's the funniest part is when he's interviewing a contestant and he just goes on and on. And, and you talk about something timeless. I mean, all these years later, I still literally laugh out loud, sometimes to tears. He's that funny. Now, I know some people, maybe they get a little tired of it. Maybe he's not their cup of tea, and I understand that. But in general, I really just love those old You Bet Your Lives. In fact, it started on radio, and then it became simulcasted on both radio and television. And then eventually they just television only. And it's a wonderful body of work. And I would say most people probably remember him more so from You Bet Your Life than anything else. I mean, his films are very popular as well. And speaking of Groucho, I have to give a plug out to our good buddy, Frank Ferrante.
Yes.
He is the #1 Groucho impersonator. He's been doing this 35 plus years. Helen and I have seen him easily 6-7 times and become good friends with him. As a matter of fact, when we did that presentation at the coffee shop and again on radio once more, we contacted him and we told him what we were doing, and we wanted him to help out, and he was very helpful. So for our last, we played 3 You Bet Your Life episodes, and for the last one, he recorded an introduction to that show. I kind of threw something together, loosely written it up, and then he worked with that, and he put a fantastic recording together and sent it in, and then so we got to play it both at the coffee shop and on radio once more. But he's been doing this one-man show for 35 years. It's called An Evening with Groucho, and it's easy to find. You can Google An Evening with Groucho. There's a Facebook page. Unfortunately, he's not touring right now because everything's kind of shut down.
Right.
But when this clears up and he's back touring again, wherever you are listening to, if you get a chance to go check out his show, it's fantastic. You will absolutely love it. It's a great show. But
it's Frank
Ferrante, Ferrante, and tell him Helen and Johnny sent you.
Okay. And when you've played those Groucho's clips from You Bet Your Life.
Mm-hmm.
He's meeting the contestants for the first time, and the husband and wife talk a little bit about themselves, and he has these really good comments, funny summaries, kind of.
Oh, he's quick, like a rapid fire memory, and he just throws it right out there. He's absolutely amazing.
And he gets, just has a good feel for the contestants, and after I was listening to what the clips that you presented, it seems like there was one of those kernels of so many other shows, growing out of that. It was just the experimental humor that he was developing when that aired in the 50s.
Started in late 40s and aired through the 50s.
Yeah, and I was seeing that more 10, I know it's 10, 11, 12 years old, and I'm seeing that same experimental humor evolving out of Saturday Night Live and the original Not Ready for Primetime Players. It just seems like there's something there that connects all these kind of shows. You get that one innovative person that just kind of pushes the envelope a little bit further. And I think that's one aspect of since this is a kind of a history-themed show, where we can trace some ideas back to some shows, and it's something I've been learning from Radio Once More. And Neil,
you actually learn from Radio Once More?
Yeah, well, I am trying to maximize my profit from Neil.
I'm shocked.
But yeah,
they learned from us. Huh? What do you think of that? That's not bad. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
I'll hit up the boss when it comes raise time. I'll point that out. The listeners actually learn from us, Neil. How about a raise?
He'll double your salary.
That's right. Double my salary.
But you were talking about Frank's one-man shows about Groucho, and Mark Dweziak's doing that with the the Twilight Zone conferences.
And he does a Mark Twain show as well. Yeah, Mark does a lot of that same type of thing that Frank does and that others do.
Yeah, and I saw his Mark Twain one 2 years ago. I couldn't. I arrived a day early for this last one, but I couldn't stay for the come back Saturday. For some. I get back to my regular caretaking job, but so I unfortunately missed.
I understood. You couldn't stand being with us. I understand.
Oh, No, but Mark's. I unfortunately missed Mark's Charles Dickens presentation, but I was really impressed with his Mark Twain impersonation the previous year, and he was. I think he spoke a little bit with Hal Holbrook about developing his Mark Twain character, and it seems like that there are those one-person shows where someone's imitating or impersonating someone out of the past, and it does give you a look into the legacy that they left. And I unfortunately haven't seen Frank's performance, but Mark's was really good about Mark Twain.
I think Mark is, like you mentioned, friends with Hal Holbrook, and I know Frank is also friends with Hal Holbrook. Frank tells a story about way back when Frank was just in college, and he went to see Hal Holbrook, and they got to chat a little bit, and they've been lifelong friends. And now Hal, of course he's up there, I think he's in his 90s now, isn't he? And he's visited Frank at his show, and I think all these people that keep the memories alive of these classic entertainers and celebrities, what Mark does, what Frank does, what Hal Holbrook has been doing. And we have a good friend also, Brad Zinn, and right along that same line, we got to meet him last year at Spurdback. Super nice guy, a super talented guy, and he does a great comedian show, and he does a handful of those classic celebrities, including W.C. Fields,
Tex Ritter.
He does Will Rogers.
Will Rogers, sorry.
He actually had to learn how to do the rope lassoing, because he does that on stage with two ropes when he does his Will Rogers bit. And he'll like start off. He'll get into a character and get into a little costume, and then he'll go behind. Depending upon the setup, either behind like a changing screen, or if it's in a larger venue, he'll go off stage and come back on. And who else did he do?
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny is one of his best. He does an amazing Jack Benny. Also does an amazing George Burns. In fact, we were scheduled to have him on earlier in the year on Radio Once More, because he was scheduled to be in Washington. The Reps Showcase, and he was going to be doing, because he participates in a lot of these conventions where they do these old-time radio recreations, and he does this famous comedian show. Unfortunately, Reps was canceled because, again, the virus situation. And so, because we were going to use his appearance on Radio Once More to kind of really publicize him being at Reps. So I touched base with him, and I said, we'll reschedule later in the year. We'll just see how things go. I mean, we'll definitely have him on. He actually listens to us every now and then. And again, I go, wait, he listens to us? But he's really a super nice guy. And it was great to meet him and spend some time with him at Spurdback in California last year. So, again, I think I successfully derailed you. Sorry, Mark.
So, Helen, how do you put up with this being derailed by
Johnny?
Oh, that's
just everyday thing that happens. Sometimes I derail him, but he does most of the derailing.
That's right. Everyday life around the Holmesley household.
That's me.
Yeah. Well, you want to say Brad had a Facebook page?
No, did you want to do yours?
Oh, our Facebook page. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a Facebook page, just if anyone's interested in our coffee shop presentations, an evening of old-time radio. And you can visit us, like us there. You can communicate with us. We also have a email address that we give out for the public if you want to say hello. Johnny and Helen Holmes at AOL.com.
Okay, and what's the Facebook one again?
An Evening of Old Time Radio.
If you don't mind, we had put that little announcement up on Facebook, letting everybody know that we're going to be on your show tonight. And we did have a lot of people check off the like feature, if you don't mind me saying who they are.
Go ahead.
Give them a shout out, sweetie.
All righty. We have Joanna Whalen, Donna Christine Park, Carrie Lynn McKay Diaz, Brian Beck, Mike Pfeiffer, Josie D. Mattia Dwyer, Anne-Marie Donnelly Myers, Johnny Redux, Dolores Hayner, Rick Goldschmidt, Henry Cruz, Marianne Lau, Mark Eddy, we know who that is.
Yep.
Christopher Benedict, Pam Ogg, Elsie Hogan Young, Grant Gardner, Karen Lynn Archer, Guy Carr, Johanna, Joanna Peterson Jamie, Mike Haley, Virginia Rothman Robbins, Stephanie Thompson, Kevin Libby, Elizabeth Adams, and Dan Duke. They all checked off the like feature for the post.
I'm going to give them a round of woohoos, Mark, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Woohoo!
And another.
Woohoo!
One more. They come in a set of 3. Woohoo! Thank you all so much, folks.
Yes. I hope some of you guys are listening.
It's good to have a large family, right?
Yes, it is.
I'm glad Mike's tuned in. I'll get the archive to him. Hopefully we can get him on a show soon and talk about his work at the Bundy Museum. And we know Mike and Dan Duke is going to be a guest with us in early June, along with his sister Teresa. So I'm glad so many other people that tuned in. We're just having a lot of fun. I hope they're enjoying the show. I know a couple other comments I've had have been very supportive.
Mike Pfeiffer is a great guy. He's been
very knowledgeable,
very kind to Helen and I. Last year, he actually invited us. He was putting together he puts these periodic programs at the Bundy Museum. For those of you who don't know, the Bundy Museum, it's in Binghamton, New York. Binghamton, New York is the hometown of Rod Serling. And in this museum, there's a Rod Serling exhibit that Mike Pfeiffer is more or less the caretaker of, the archivist of everything. And he does a great job out of putting all this neat paraphernalia up. And he periodically has these in the zone presentations with some aspect of Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone or some of his other things he was connected with, early Rod Serling or Night Gallery, that type of thing. He even was able to get a couple of radio recordings, so he wanted to do a radio-related Rod Serling presentation. And as part of that, he invited Helen and I to come up, since we do these coffee shop presentations that we were talking about, and to do like a miniature version of that to go along with what he was presenting about Rod Serling. So we actually got to do a miniature version of an Evening of Old Time Radio right there in the Bundy Museum, and we had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And we mentioned about the Hall of Fantasy a little bit earlier in the show. The first episode we played was an episode from the Hall of Fantasy, and then we moved and did some sci-fi from a great series called X-1. And that was about a year ago, last April. And we had a great time. It was a nice crowd there. It was, again, Mike, if you're listening, thank you so much. That meant the world to Helen and I. And he was kind enough to invite us again up this year. But again, unfortunately, because of the virus situation, we had to cancel that. But we were talking about doing something time travel related. Rod Serling did a lot of time travel related in his in the Twilight Zone and his other works. And he thought, can you play a couple old time shows that's connected to time travel? I said, oh, do I? Can I do that? Because we actually did a time travel presentation at the coffee shop.
Yes.
I think we called it Time Passages.
That's right.
And so we have, and we're hoping to do it next year. We're hoping that the air clears and this moves on, and life will have some more normalcy to it. So we're hoping next April we get to do it, and we're going to play an episode from a series called Dimension X, and then an episode again from X-1.
Johnny and Helen, do you get a lot of these shows from just YouTube? Is there another way that people can find these? Like a website where they can download all these shows. Where do you get all this material?
Well, a lot of the programs that I have, I've collected over the years. You can buy CD sets. I know a lot of people don't like the idea, spending money on it, but I think it is important to support a lot of these companies like Radio Archives and Radio Classics, because it keeps them going. What they do is they go out and they try to find transcription discs and release shows that have never been released before. But that requires funds, so you got to sort of support them. Purchase some of their CD sets. It keeps them up and running, and that'll help perpetuate and keep the shows up and running. But there are avenues to download as well. One of the ones that I use, it's the old time. I don't know if I have the old time radio research library. Can you look that up, sweetie?
Mm-hmm.
OTTR. It's an organization that tries to put together the best quality shows available, and they have them kind of organized in a website where you can download them. And I've certainly got a lot of stuff from them, and of course from Big Boss Neil Ellis, who's been collecting things, easily probably since the 1970s, 1960s. He's been doing this, quite a while. And
Holmesy.
Well, sorry, Neil. And so he's been kind enough and very generous. He's shared everything he has with us, since we play things on Radio Once More and at the coffee shop and so forth. Did you come across that? Old Time Radio Research Library?
Oh, hold on.
She's looking. So there is lots of stuff. And you mentioned YouTube. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of everything on YouTube.
OTRRlibrary.org.
Okay, there you go.
There's many websites you can go to listen and download and purchase different old time radios shows.
Yes. So it's definitely out there. I know the big question that comes up, well, what about copyright? And that's a huge gray area. Our policy at Radio Once More is that most things are still under some type of copyright. Although I know that, and I've talked to our good buddy Walden, he says after so many years, though, more and more shows will be in what they call the public domain. And quite frankly, I don't understand all that. I didn't study law in school. I just barely got through accounting. So Big Boss Neil is the guide. He says we could pretty much play anything. We really won't have an issue because he's been doing this so long. He knows what's fair game and what to stay away from. And the two biggies that we do stay away from, the other internet radio stations play it. They may have special clearances. I know our good buddy Walden at Yesterday USA, he does have special clearances to play most series. We don't have that at Radio Once More. So the two that we stay away from is the Shadow and the Green Hornet. So those two we don't play. But pretty much everything else we play.
Or maybe some things from the 70s.
Yeah, the newer shows we can't play either, like CBS Radio Mystery Theater. That came out in the 70s. There's the Sears Radio Theater, also came out in the 70s. And even one that Rod Serling was the announcer on, 0 Hour.
Mm-hmm.
That also came out in the 70s. But we really can't play those either. I have recordings of a lot of them, and I play them for myself here in the house, but I can't play them at the... I guess I could play at the coffee shop, if it's just a small group, but
no,
I wouldn't do that because what we've been doing since 2013, when we do a presentation at the coffee shop, usually on a Friday night. The following Wednesday, we do it again on the radio once more. And this is something we call our
recapitulation presentation.
Exactly. Say that 3 times fast, Mark.
I'm going to fail at the first one. I'm not even going to try.
Exactly right. The recapitulation presentation. So we do it at the coffee shop, and then we do it again for radio once more. And that was Neil's idea, to do it again. And that's kind of what got us into radio once more, actually. So it's a great transition. We were doing these coffee shops, and we got to know Neil. We met him a few times at various conventions. Martin Graham's Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Convention, and I think we met him first at the Friends of Old Time Radio in Newark, New Jersey, which unfortunately they don't run anymore. Jay Hickerson retired from that, and he's now down in Florida.
And the one in Cincinnati.
And then we met him at the one in Cincinnati, which again, that's another one that's no longer. These conventions, unfortunately, are closing down. But Mank is still up and running, and that's a great convention. If you could ever make it there, Mark, I think you'd enjoy that.
Okay. These Martin's conventions attract some great actors and actresses from classic TV. You're going to a lot of those conventions up and down the East Coast. One of the people that I don't know if you met him at a convention, but you've actually met Grandpa Munster.
Yes, I did.
What's the story there?
That was a funny story. This is long before I even met Helen.
That's before me.
And before we started going to these conventions, for many years, he ran a museum in Greenwich Village, New York City, on Bleecker Street. And interesting name of the restaurant. It was called Grandpa's. And he actually served as your host. You would walk in this little foyer area. And as soon as you would walk in, he would be sitting there to the right in like a stool with, this goes way back. I probably did it in the 80s. And he had these beat up old jeans, holes in them and everything. And he had a big old cigar hanging out of his mouth. Hi, how you doing? Hi, yeah, thanks for coming. Hi, how you doing? That's basically it. But I was thrilled just to meet him. I said, pleasure to meet you, sir. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. That's what we did. But it was interesting. I didn't get an autograph. Wasn't really collecting autographs back then, and I don't even know if that would be the proper thing to do. I guess he's probably did some autographs there, but it was neat seeing him and chatting with him. We also since then met Butch Patrick a number of times because he does the circuit on these conventions.
And Lisa Loring.
Well, she was from
it's the Addams Family.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But we did meet Cousin Marilyn.
Yes, we did meet Cousin Marilyn. Yes.
What's her name? Not Beverly Owen.
Priest.
Patricia Priest.
That's it.
Yes.
Met her a couple times. Twice, actually.
I think we did meet her twice.
Helen is, Patricia Priest, the favorite person you've met at one of these classic TV conventions, or is there someone else that?
Well, I've met many, many people that I have enjoyed meeting.
What was one of your most favorite ones?
I tend to veer over to the scary people. I've met Udo Kerr. I've met Tom Savini. Many, 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 many people.
We met a few big names, right? We met Anne Margaret.
Yep.
Wow.
We met Meatloaf.
Meatloaf?
Oh, yeah, I've met him.
Oh, really?
Oh. Was that
we were there. It was like a Rocky Horror pseudo reunion.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of that.
Yep.
Over the years we've met a lot of biggies, some Star Trek personalities. Shatner.
Yeah, we did go to Star Trek conventions. We met majority of the Star Trek captains. I have one left to meet to get my captain's picture autographed, and that's Scott Bakula. Haven't seen him.
Who do you want to meet most of all?
That's still alive?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's so many. He just passed away a day or two ago, and I was saying I would have loved to meet, because I love the TV series Green Acres, and Tom Lester was the only one left still living, and he just died, I think, a
couple days ago. And I would have loved to meet him, because I still get a kick out of Green Acres. I think it's somewhat of an underrated series, but it pushes the envelope as far as being silly and all. Oh, actually, my top favorite person that I just met last year, I actually met this person 35 years ago, and he just made the rounds again for some of the conventions, and that is Clive Barker, who's the author.
Wow.
Yes.
But so what was that meeting like? Where did it take place?
That was at the Monster Mania convention last August, I believe it was. And we got to meet him. I got a photo op taken with him. I told him he's given me goosebumps all my life. And then I also got a chance to go and see where he was doing autographs, and I got his autograph. So it was very nice.
Yeah, he give you like a impersonation of, like, what's it like we have eternity to know your flesh, or did he say anything like that to, just like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that to me?
No, not really. I just I had some of his original books that he had signed 2 of them 35 years ago, and then I brought the rest of them for him to sign, and he was amazed that I had them, and I talked to him about a couple of his other books, and he was a very, very pleasant person to talk to.
Yeah, I've only seen his the Hellraiser trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are more. But those are.
And that's only one of his stories in his Books of Blood series. He has 20 or 30 books out, maybe even more. But majority of them I've read already.
Those movies seem like they are like their own category of horror type movies.
Mm-hmm.
They really seem like they're a little closer to Poe or Frankenstein, where they're looking at, or Clive is looking at mental conditions of people, and he's expressing some of his concern about like a personality deterioration in some aspects.
It's possible. You never know where people get their ideas for their books.
Oh, well, it's just they're very. He just seems like he left a big influence on modern horror writing.
Oh yeah, of course, him and Stephen King, one of my other favorites.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't met him, but we did visit his house.
Yes, we did.
Bangor, Maine.
Oh, okay, you did make it up there. What did you think of Bangor and Stephen's house?
It was very interesting. Behind his house, actually, he is co-owner of the minor league baseball team up there in Bangor, and the field is just behind his house. But his house is very Gothic looking. his fence around the house has bats and cobwebs and whatnot on there. And every now and then, we didn't see him, but they said in Bangor, he just a regular guy, go to the store, get his groceries, go to the post office, all that kind of stuff.
So, does he still live there full-time, part-time?
I think he does part-time in Florida and majority of the time in Maine, but I think he has a place in Florida also.
Okay. Does Stephen have any new books that just came out?
Let me double check.
She's looking.
I'm looking. I know he's written some books with his son, Joe Hill. I'm just looking to see what...
Helen's the reader in the family. I don't do much reading. Shame on me. Although we did listen to some audiobooks when I was still working, when we were driving to the office. We listened to quite a few audiobooks, and that was a big treat. A lot of the classics. Mm-hmm. And we listened to a book we mentioned about Mel Blanc. We read read, if you will, a recent biography, and had a lot of neat stories in about Mel Blanc. And Sherlock Holmes, did quite a few. That was fun.
Right. He does have a recent book out. It's called Sleeping Beauties. He wrote with Owen King. That's his son. His newest one's called The Institute, and he also has one called The Outsider, which I believe they just made to a mini-series on Hulu. Those are his newest ones.
Yeah, speaking of Stephen King, he was a Twilight Zone fan, and we were just talking about Mike Pfeiffer, Mark Dweziak, some of the other people at little get-togethers. When we had one of our breakfasts, Mark Olshaker was...
Yes, he was like sitting right behind us, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, and then Mark came out, and that's, Barbara's going to get that photo here next time she ventures out to the mailbox. But we had Mark Dweziak came over to the table. We were talking to him. The little book sale there for the Red Dragon Rider. Another one of the listeners, but Mark was involved in that Mindhunter.
Yes.
Netflix series. But did Helen? Did you have a chance to read his Mark Olshaker's book Mindhunter?
I do not. I haven't read it yet. I do have it in our back room from our Twilight Zone paraphernalia, but I have not written that one yet. I read that one yet. I've heard the TV show is very good.
Yeah, Mark's working on a book now. He has an open invitation. We have corresponded about him being a guest, but he had a connection with Rod Serling.
He was one of his students, correct? I think.
So, it was something like that, and he's still close friends with Anne, but he's co-authoring several books on like a regular basis with John Douglas from like Silence of the Lambs. Jack Crawford was from Silence of the Lambs was based on John Douglas. And they're writing these books on all these different cases and what makes them unique in the forensic profiling category. And so there we are. Just all these Twilight Zone geeky kind of people, and there's so many people there at these conferences that have these really fascinating careers going on.
Oh yeah.
But that Mindhunter is a really neat book. I have been enjoying that, and he has. I can find it real quickly. What there's a. There it is. Where is they? Mark has his own book on Virus Hunter, 30 Years of Battling How Viruses Around the Hot Viruses Around the World, and another book on Deadliest Enemy, Our War Against Killer Germs, that he co-authored with Michael Osterholm. That's very topical. So hopefully we can get him on the show and talk about all this, criminal profiling that he's done. It's really just astonishing work, and hopefully his book will be out soon. I know so many things are suddenly became behind schedule because of
the Virus Hunter book was printed in 1998.
Yeah, it's actually not. It has nothing to do with what's going on, or it may have predicted what's going on today. But it's not a recent book, but it would be fascinating to talk with him about what are patterns you saw 20 years ago. Has anything changed? As things become more nefarious? That'd be a fascinating discussion. So I'm hoping that he will be a guest with us. But that was just like a real honor. You're sitting there eating waffles, and Mark comes in and said, good morning. We're all staying at the same hotel, and he just he and his wife sit down behind us, and we'll congregate around the waffle maker a machine, and just talk and go back to the table. It's just very interesting guy.
He was very nice. I enjoyed talking with him about his book and everything.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot out of that. So hopefully we'll have him be a guest soon. And Johnny mentioned Walden. How do you do those shows where you are simulcasting with Yesterday USA and Walden's show?
What we do is when I sign in, we have a couple of different things going on. When we broadcast for Radio Once More for our own show, I have software on the computer that I sign in, and when I click the button, we pretty much take over operations, so to speak. So we're switching broadcast from, because Neil's located down in Maryland, but since he gave me the password, I wonder if he regrets that at this point. And so when I put in the username and password, at that point I take over, and then we do our 3-hour show. And then when I click log off, it reverts back to the automation, which is what's playing continuously from Maryland. Now, when we do a simulcast with Walden, Big John, the Gassmans, Patricia, the whole gang over at Yesterday USA, they use a platform. Well, it's actually pretty popular now, Zoom. You've probably heard of that, right?
Yeah.
They've been using Zoom for a few years, but that has really picked up popularity ever since this virus situation. And so what I do is the computer that I'm running right now, like you and I are communicating via Skype, the same computer I also have Zoom installed on. So what I do is I'll sign in to Radio Once More. I'll say hello, and then I'll say, okay, stand by. Let's hook up with Walden or Big John or whoever we're hooking up with, or maybe everybody. And then I sign into Zoom, and then that's how we're all connected. So they're broadcasting via Zoom. I'm able to take our feed, if you will, and put it into what they call the Zoom room, and we can all hear each other and speak and so forth. And that's how we do it. It's really not that complicated.
Oh, okay.
Unless something goes wrong, and that happens also, as I'm sure you've experienced. The beauty of live radio.
Uh-huh. And it's usually during my show, too. And but, it is interesting, the technology that helps merge two different networks, so one could participate in a show, but it also demonstrates that there really is a market for this type of subject material. Helen read off the list of a whole bunch of people who really sent likes, and hopefully they put some comments in there about they really like the show. But
we did have a friend of ours, Donna, gave us a big woohoo because we are the woohoo people, so the woohoo couple.
Woohoo, Donna.
Woohoo.
But I've taken a little bit of a more of a historical angle of looking at pop culture tonight. Johnny hasn't derailed me from what I wanted to try to accomplish, but still thinking I got most everything in one to do. But it does seem like there is an interest in Walden's show or your show. When Neil jumps on and gets involved. There's lively discussion. There's so some of the trivia does help to make all these connections to people's career, like we were talking about Vincent Price and his I don't know what probably 50-year career in acting. It is really interesting about the service that Radio Once More and Yesterday USA offers.
It just kind of blows my mind, with it being internet based. It still awes me that because of this we're talking worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
The World Wide Web, so anyone in the world can be listening to us, and it's hard for me to believe. When we do our show on Wednesdays and we'll do our intro, our opening, and then we usually move into our first old-time radio offering of the night, and then I hit that, and then the show's playing, and I say to Helen, all right, I'm going to go downstairs, get a cup of coffee. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. And we have an internet radio that's playing in the kitchen 24/7 on Radio Once More. Because I told you, I'm on there right now. In fact, I'll be on for another 50 minutes, and then I'll be signing off. And it blows my mind that as I go down there and I hear it coming out of the internet radio, and I go, wow, I'm playing this upstairs on my laptop. It's going through the computer, through the whole world, and then it's coming out of this little box in the kitchen. It just, I don't know, it's hard for me to comprehend all that. Now it's pretty cool. Of course, we always add the caveat when it works, because there's times when internet goes down or you lose electric or whatever.
What we're doing is a lot of fun. I enjoy the Tuesday nights. I enjoy tuning in to hear Woohoo Wednesdays. We've had Martin Graham's on, but approaching a year ago. He went into a lot of detail about I forget which book he was. It might have been his book on the Shadow radio series, and it's saying he was doing some of his research in Akron, Ohio, at the was it the Firestone tire plant. I just remember asking him, I was like, what are you doing there? And he said, like they had a lot of the manuscripts because they were the original sponsor of the radio show. So, gee, that's okay. Now I understand that. And it just at first it really caught me off guard. I was expecting him to be talking. Had to go to L.A. or something like that. But it's really nice to have met so many people through these conventions who are doing a great job of preserving it's for that particular genre of history. People like Martin have done a great job of writing their books. It's very well documented. He presents it in a interesting way, and
it's amazing because he looks like a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
so young, and to be researching all these old topics like you mentioned, the Shadow, the Green Hornet, and all that Inner Sanctum. Yeah.
Well, and I think he has a Alfred Hitchcock Presents book.
Yes.
I think his book on the Lone Ranger. He was working on that last year when we had him as a guest. I don't know the status of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's been released yet, but I think it's real close, and I think it's going to be in multiple volumes. I believe 2 or even 3 volumes. I mean, that's a big topic if you're talking about the whole legacy of the Lone Ranger. I think he's in the process of getting it proofread and all that, and I don't know. I imagine maybe this virus situation is probably thrown a monkey wrench into that as well.
I learned today. One of my friends said that the CD he has recorded was supposed to be out this month, and it just due to the virus, it's not going to be out till at some point in the fall. The CD making company is just shut down, so just everything's come to standstill.
Many conventions of Chiller Theater was canceled. They were going to try to remake it in June, but they just announced yesterday that that's canceled. So there's another one scheduled for October. So That's what they're shooting for, and we'll just see how the time is then. Martin's convention is scheduled for September. I mean, again, we'll have to see, how safe things will be then. So everything's kind of up in the air. We were supposed to, as I said, to be up at the Bundy with Mike and the gang to do some old time radio. I think it was just last weekend, and of course that was canceled. So, yeah, a lot of things have been, upset because of this. But we're trying to keep positive, and one thing, we can still do our internet thing. That's a wonderful thing. We just keep doing that, and keep a positive attitude, and know that eventually things will get somewhat back to normal.
Yeah, let's just hope and pray that happens, because really the Rod Serling Twilight Zone conferences are just terrific, and you've mentioned so many other ones that you go to. Martin holds his in with the Baltimore area.
Yeah, Hunt Valley, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore.
That's it. So, if people like these concepts of old-time radio, classic TV, this year just doesn't have a lot. A lot of things have changed. Hopefully, some will happen later this year. Hopefully, 2021 is going to, we'll be back on track. But this is just a lot of fun. Just talking about things like this. Meeting Grandpa Munster and.
Hi, how you doing? Hi. Met Batman, met Robin, met Batgirl, met Catwoman. Met a lot of them from Batman.
And those experiences just really do stay with you. You grew up with these actors and actresses.
We really appreciate you joining with us, and please tune in next week. Both Mark and I will have a great show. Thanks so much for being with us. Good night.